Hello everyone. Hello to friends who are here and hello to the ones who are watching this session online. So yesterday we took the note of how do we write answers. What should be our approach to writing answers? And then we started with the idea of administrative thought, covering the gamut of things with regards to the SMT and the CMT. Today we'll start with the human relations school. And whenever we talk about human relations school, the first name that comes to our mind is Alton Mayo. Okay? Yes, there are more scholars as well, but it is largely Mayo who's credited to be the father of the human relations movement or the human relation school. It is a common understanding of all of us that the human relations school came into the picture because of the lack of emphasis on the human aspect in the CMT, SMT era. While the focus of the CMT and SMT was on formal structure, scientific methods, they ignored the human relations aspect. Now there are a few important points. This human relations school is not a monolith. We'll have to understand. It also has somewhat diversity. So while there is humanistic theory, there is also a socio-economic theory. Right? And then we call it as a neoclassical theory. What I want to emphasize upon the point is that yes, and you should remember that because the questions can actually try and explore these blurred lines. That yes, human relations school or the coming up of human relations school was a result of the disenchantment or the flaws which we see with the lack of human element in the classical era and the SMT era. But it is not something that they completely dumbed away the classical thinking. They did not completely reject it. They retained the emphasis on organization, its processes, its workings. They continued to remain scientific, empirical in their approach, right? It's just that they, instead of looking for a monolith, empirical, scientific, inward orientation, mechanistic lens, they were looking at it or incorporating the human behavior as well. If you look at Mayo, what were those experiments? Experimentation is a trait of what? It's a trait of scientificism. Okay, and therefore we say neoclassical. Okay, something which was new over and above the classic. You have other thinkers like McGregor, Lickhart, okay, Dixon, Milberg, Henderson, Lloyd. Right. So you should at least be familiar with the broad idea. I am not asking you to go through their theories and their works for the simple reason that it is not possible to go through every theorist, especially when we have a limited amount of time. But the idea is if you know the theme, that is more than sufficient. Also remember, nobody will say that, okay, give me the thought of Dixon. They will be preluded by a context. So while doing that, while judging that statement, try and identify where does it fit or a combination, howsoever may be applicable. Okay, so this is the intelligent working that I would seek from your end. All right. Now, Mayo is famous for his Hawthorne studies, Philadelphia textile mill experiment as part of the Hawthorne study, and Hawthorne study was a long drawn process. It was not just one study. Whether it was the elimination experiment, relay assembly test room experiment, interviewing program, right, or the bank wiring room experiment. I am deliberately not getting into the details of this experiment because that is something which is, at least I am assuming that you all know, right? You all know that. Padha hai? Okay. So we'll try and identify the takeaways, the larger takeaways. And through this approach, let us try and identify the basic elements. So human relation approach incorporates the sensitivity towards social norms. Linking those very social norms to the organizational effectiveness. Remember the socializing aspect of the workers? What is it? That they had to have a pint of their drink for socializing. Okay? Also, group standards. See, why I am giving you this? Because these pointers can actually act as quick revision notes, one, and you can directly use them in the answers. Okay? Group standards influence the individual behavior in the organization, the workers' behavior. Also, strongest motivators. And here when I talk about motivators, I mean both positive and negative. That is the social rewards and sanctions. Okay. The next very critical element which Mayo talks about is supervision. You see, you can link this idea of supervision to Weber's authority, to Foley's idea, to other things like depersonalization of authority, contribution satisfaction equilibrium. Okay, other folks. Remember, we'll be talking about Bernard as well. Okay. Similarly, Simon. So you can link all these things to reinforce a theme. Okay. So the consultative managers, the consultative supervisors who actually consult their subordinates. Zone of indifference, zone of acceptance, all those concepts are linking here. Okay, they perform better. Okay. Also, with regards to the Hawthorne studies, there are certain key takeaways that emerge. First, organization is a social system. Now, if organization is a social system, the management will have to use socio-psychological means to motivate the individuals. And the classical idea of monetary reward being the only incentive is not correct. Okay? The work which or the potential work that an individual can contribute is not a function of just the physical work, but also the social capacity. These very non-economic rewards and sanctions impact the capacity. The significance of the informal groups and the desire of an individual to associate or be part of such groups, and how these informal groups actually behave, conduct, organize, carry out their activities, which are different from that of the formal authority. Whenever there is a clash, more likely it is the informal group's leaders' words that are going to be obeyed. The significance of the we feeling. And remember, this informal group aspect is both an opportunity and a threat. Threat if the informal group is not aligned with the organizational goals. Opportunity if it aligns. So it acts as a booster to the formal processes. Otherwise, it's going to act as a dampener. Okay? And hence, the participative approach of leadership is something which is needed. And hence there should be a right mix of the formal and informal mechanisms. The formal structure should have a space or recognition for the informal aspect. And it is the responsibility of the management to bring up harmonization between the two. Also, Hawthorne studies or Mayo highlights the importance of the clear communication because it helps elicit participation, thereby helping the decision making. Okay, so in these things, do it like this: communication. Right, wrong. Right encourages participation. Wrong disincentivizes participation. Okay? Like this. So if there will be participation, there will be more decision making. So this will lead to better decision making. This will lead to poor decision making. Now, this will lead to what? Suboptimum realization of goals. And this will lead to what? This will lead to positive realization of goals. So by this figure, I am communicating the relevance of communication as per Mayo. Okay? Also, whenever you are talking about the manager, he should have certain skills, interpersonal skills. Okay? Human relations skills. Also, both of them are a function of what? if let us say you have a boss, I mean, boil it down to the most basic experience in your life. Some of you, or rather many of you, have already worked somewhere. If your boss is a lallu fellow, he does not know anything, he talks nonsense, will you respect him? No. But if you know that your boss, he knows the work like the back of his hand or her hand, you'll think twice. Otherwise, you'll say, okay, BAU, chalta hai, attitude, theek hai, usko kaun sa pata lag raha hai. You'll not be able to identify. So this is something very important. Okay. So the skills of the manager would now include the concept or the domain knowledge. So we can say also technical skills. A very pertinent point that Mayo is making here is that the concept of authority should flow from the social skills. The concept of authority should flow from the social skills, because he argues that no matter how much you put that authority in the system, but the human aspects, if they are not conducive, they are going to negate that authority. And hence, the authority should come from the social skills, so that the cooperation of the workers or the members of the organization can be secured.
Merit-based recruitment process.
They have not, remember, all those classical ideas will remain. Nobody is saying compromise on the merit. Nobody is saying do not have financial incentives. Nobody is saying that you should not be empirical. That thing remains.
The reason for that mass interview process.
Mass interview process, so you need merit. It is not, remember, what human relations school is pointing out are the flaws. It is not negating the classical idea left, right and center and saying, oh, this entire project is a failure, or this entire project is something which is incorrect. It is saying that it is lacking in some aspects. Okay. ये clear हो गया ना कि merit will remain there, right?
So, mostly marks the different types of bureaucracy. There was patronage and caste. So,
You can link with the bureaucratic theory, especially with people like Morstein Marx, who says 4 different types of bureaucracies. Wherever there will be patronage, there would be patrimonial characteristics, there would be primordial norms which will dictate. That is why in things like NPM, etc., we are talking about from normative to empirical. Okay? So this was the broad pointers that I wanted to give you about Mayo. Let's look at the criticism. They say that Mayo does nothing. It's only a cosmetic change. That the so-called union leaders have been replaced by human-oriented supervisors. The management will continue to negotiate with the workers that they were doing. It is just a cosmetic change. That means it undermines the importance of the unions. A criticism which is similar, that is, let us say, leveled against Taylor. Okay? To the extent that Lauren Barrett's called Mayo anti-unionist. and a pro-management scholar. The Hawthorne studies and his team, because Mayo was not alone, there was a team with him, right? They were called as cow sociologists. Cow sociologists, in the sense you would have seen people, who are into bovine culture, and they keep cows and all, guale, right? People who are into milk business, what they do? They would, just pat the cow, rub her, and like that, and then put the injection and milk. Okay, so they say that these people are nothing but cow sociologists. Okay, so this cow sociologist was labeled by United Auto Works in 1949. Also, substantive criticism include, not to suggest that this is not substantive, but the point here I want to make is something which is specific in terms of a concept. They said that Mayo is making very broad conclusions based on very little experimentation. A small group of 5-6 people cannot be a reliable sample. So they say there was a wide gap between the findings of the experiment and the conclusions that were drawn. That means the so-called scientific studies were not scientific enough. Then our very own Drucker, Peter Drucker, says that the studies actually miss on the economic dimension. He says that Mayo was so focused on the interpersonal relations that he neglected certain very important ideas like nature of work, the organizational goals, etc. He concentrates groups and segments the workers based on emotional parameters, sentimental parameters, and therefore it lacks direction. Also, the intrusion, he is actually accusing Mayo or the Maoist of intrusion of the management of an organization into the personal lives of the employees. Also, in matters of conflict, Mayo sought to bring about harmony through the subordination of the individual or group interest. Whereas Foley talks about integration. So that makes the first question. Contrast views of Foley and Mayo on the aspect of conflict. Take it as a 10 marker. Also, people say that Mayo went about his work and his analysis without adding any ethical filters or ethical presuppositions in the study. His methodology was faulty. Also, the idea of a conflict-free situation, conflict-free organization is whimsical thinking. That means the human relations approach was flawed because it failed to incorporate the larger social and technological dimension.
Foley terms conflict as both positive, also have positive traits.
You will have to understand what Foley terms is. Okay, it's a positive trait. How actually Mayo is trying to resolve the conflict? Through subordination, whereas Foley is trying integration. So the approach is different,
Yes.
right? So that is the difference that you have to actually bring about. Okay, but while criticizing Mayo, Drucker also admits that in terms of the systematization, in terms of the overall approach, the Mayo's work was one of the best and complete. Yes, it can be refined, but it was a very comprehensive work indeed. Also, Mayo's work actually theoretically presents an idea which is validated by his experimentation, that there needs to be a channel which should be opened between the upper echelons and the lower echelons in the organization, higher levels to lower levels. Also, his emphasis on informal organization proved to be a groundbreaking idea in studying how the group behavior, group culture, etc. impact the organization. Okay, understood? So this approach has to be taken. Right? Next, let us take up Chester Bernard. Chester Bernard. You see, Bernard was amongst the very foremost organizational theorists. Okay? And he is considered as the father of the, or the spiritual father of the social system school. Okay? So that is something which is important. His most popular work is the functions of the executive. Now, please understand a bit of a difference. While Mayo was looking at social system, something which is running a parallel course with the formal system, and how actually both contribute or influence each other and the organization. Okay? However, when we look at Bernard, he takes it a level higher. He is looking at this formal system also as a cooperative system. So that means it is not working on the crutches of rules, positions, hierarchy. When I say it is not working, I do not mean that they are not there. They are there. But he does not actually take away the idea that the social system is something which is running a parallel course. According to him, it is very much the part of the entire larger system. Okay, so the traditional definition of an organization, which was based on the idea of members and functions, the membership and the functionality, Bernard rejected, and he puts that interaction at the core, the system of interaction at the core. Therefore, he says that an organization, that is the formal part of the organization, is a system of consciously coordinated activities or forces of two or more persons. Okay? And he says that the executive is the most strategic factor in this organized cooperative system. And he premises this relationship between individual and organization cardinal, based on which the entire cooperative system rests. What keeps this together? The relationship is there, but it is based on certain common purpose. It is based on certain common purpose. Willingness of individuals to participate in the organizational function. And third important aspect is the communication. The ability of these individuals to communicate with each other. So the common purpose, willingness and communication. He also undermines the importance of the economic incentive. And in this light, he talks about 4 specific inducements. Material inducements, personal, non-material, opportunities for earning distinction, personal power, and desirable physical conditions. That is, having a pride in one's workmanship. So the idea is fairly simple. Whatever elements Bernard is highlighting as crucial to bring about organizational effectiveness. Now, in this case, if this is an organization, there are certain elements, the elements that I have listed. Okay, A, B, C, D, let us say, are those elements. So what is the duty of the management? If it is to bring about efficiency, it should enhance these, or to address inefficiency, it should bring about these. This is a simple idea, no? Okay. Also, Bernard is talking about 4 general incentives. How one can rely on his or her associates, adaptation of the working conditions, opportunity of the feeling of enlarged participation, and the communication. Okay. So cooperation and this cooperative relationship is central to Bernard's view of organization and to bring about its efficiency and effectiveness. Okay. This was Bernard's view regarding formal organization. Now on the informal aspect. Bernard says that this informal organization is something which is natural, will remain. Formal organizations are artificial systems and they grow out of the informal organizations which are natural. And these formal organizations give rise to new informal organizations. Okay? So, informal organization gives rise to formal organization. This formal organization will give rise to another informal organization. Okay? Now, the significance of informal organizations. Mind you, very short 100 worder, 150 worder, a 10 marker again. Contrast views of Mayo and Bernard on the informal organization. Contrast views of Mayo and Bernard on the informal organization. Now you see, informal organizations have a significant role to play. For example, they help in communicating intangible facts, opinions, suggestions, suspicions that the formal channel might not permit. They help in maintaining the social and psychological cohesiveness. Helping members forge a relationship. Also, these informal organization helps in maintaining the feeling of personal integrity, self-respect, independent choice. So these informal organizations act as agents of preservation of a personal or an individual identity or personality of an individual. Whereas the formal processes actually are the agents of disintegrating the individualistic or the personality elements. Okay? And to understand the organizations, again, the interaction between the formal and the informal organization is indispensable. Okay? And this network of interpersonal relationships determine the efficiency and goal attainment of the organization. So they are like two sides of a coin. While the society systems create the formal organizations, it is the informal organization which actually provide them the life. If one organization fails, the other will fail as well. Another question. You see, you might choose to write few of them. I'll be glad if you can write all of them. Right. But at least reflect on these lines. Okay. In Bernard's view, formal and informal aspects of an organization are mutually dependent. If one fails, the other will necessarily fail. Okay? Understood? If one fails, the other will necessarily fail. ठीक है जी. Now another very important aspect of Bernard is individual motivation. Here he is looking at motivations from two aspects, that is positive motivation and negative motivation. Positive motivation would be inducements. And these inducements are to be provided by the organization to the participants. The negative motivations has been the contribution, which is made by the participant. So till the time inducements are outweighing the contributions, a person is likely to remain committed to the organization. So between these inducements and contributions, there has to be a equilibrium, which is Bernard is talking about as a contribution satisfaction equilibrium. Okay. Similarly, Bernard's view on authority. क्या कहता है विवेक बर्नार्ड on authority? What does he say? Okay. Another task. Authority. Talk about Weber and other thinkers, including Bernard. What are they saying? A comparative diagram I need. क्या कह रहा है बर्नार्ड? सबऑर्डिनेशन तो मेयो है. अरे यार, आइडिया ऑफ एक्सेप्टेंस ऑफ अथॉरिटी. अरे हाँ, एग्जाम में कब याद आएगा? ओके. So you see, while we are talking about acceptance of authority, there are two elements which are central. One, how the order is communicated. And second, who is communicating the order. Right? Or whose order it is, rather. Because Bernard actually, while looking at the character of the communication in terms of order, okay, there is an element of subjectivity. Okay. So the subjective part is the acceptance of the communication as authority, while the objective part will be concerned with the character of the communication, and both of them need to be there for it to be accepted. Okay. So whenever there is a question on communication by Bernard, always remember that there are traits of what kind of communication should be there. For example, it should be clear, intelligible communication. Okay, it should align with the organizational purpose. It should not be detrimental to personal interest of the individual, etc., etc. So always reflect on these ideas. Don't say communication, barriers to communication, that all of you might have learned in your personality enhancement classes in engineering or management. Another concept which Bernard lays stress on is the zone of indifference. क्या होता है ये कॉन्सेप्ट? हाँ जी बताइए. क्या होता है जोन ऑफ इंडिफरेंस?
So basically, between the formal and the informal, what workers think, what the managers.
No. You see, zone of indifference will be a zone where the orders are unconditionally acceptable. Okay? Unquestionably they are acceptable. That means indifference क्या होता है? फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Okay? Word का meaning English to Hindi or your native language, try and think on it. So as long as orders will fall within this zone, they will be accepted. Otherwise they won't. They will be questioned. There will be follow-ups. Okay. Also, Bernard's idea of fiction of authority. He says that it is important that the fiction of authority should be maintained because it helps individuals delegate upward. or towards the organizational whenever there is an element of decision making, that no, I will not decide, let the boss decide. Okay. Also, with regards to authority, Bernard talks about authority by position and authority of leadership. Also, with regards to decisions, Bernard talks about the personal decisions and the organizational decisions. With regards to decision making, Bernard says that the decisions at the upward levels or at the upper levels have more to do with the goals of the organization, whereas decision at the lower level is more regarding the implementation or actions to be performed to achieve those goals. And remember, he views this decision making as a specialized activity. Okay? Three critical factors for organizational decision making: purpose of the decision, speed which is required, and the quality of information that is available.
So field quality and the organization to
क्या चीज कह रहे हो?
the field quality of information available.
Whenever we are talking about decision, there are three things. One is the quality of the information available, speed which is needed, and the purpose. Okay. Now, a brief pointers on Bernard's contribution. I'm not getting into the theory, each one of them. Otherwise, we'll be talking about 2 hours on Bernard only. You see, whenever we are looking at Bernard vis-a-vis administration, we have to look at certain key aspects in the organization. Okay, that it's a free contractual relationship between the organization and the participants. Okay, the authority actually resides in the relationship between the superordinate and the subordinate, and it is the consent of the subordinate without which it cannot be exercised. Communication is indispensable for the exercise of this authority. Also, the equilibrium between the contribution and the satisfaction, and all of it gets dictated by the organizational purpose. Okay. Now please understand the criticisms. People like Andrews say that Bernard's work was very, very abstract. It has pedestrian examples. Baker, RJS Baker, also says that it is very bookish. It is something which lacks the practical aspects. You see, Bernard took this criticism positively and he admitted that it lacks the practical orientation. Okay. Also, Bernard fails to provide an action plan. We all say that, okay, these are the factors, bring up those factors, but how? There is no action plan. So, there is no full descriptive or prescriptive attention which is given. Also, Bernard's ignoration or ignoring of Bernard of the objective authority while talking about authority. So he leaves it to the individual's choice, sidelining the objective part of the authority. For leadership also, it is the same abstractness accusation that is leveled against Bernard. Also, if you look at while dealing with these relationships, Bernard is actually more focusing on the lower part and less focusing on the upper part or the higher authorities or the higher management. Okay. Like I told you an exercise to go and look at the statements of the scholars. Have a look at the statements of Bernard. If you look at Bernard, many questions have been asked, and let me give you a few. 2070, executive position imply a complex morality. Executive position imply a complex morality and require high capacity of responsibility. Now, can anybody tell me the gist of this? What does it imply?
Left on individual choices mostly.
First of all, tell me the question is focused on leaders or the workers?
It is on leaders, executive position, managers.
ठीक है.
Uh,
So what does the question mean?
Whatever the issues of the organization under him, or
What issues?
like corporate work issues or the behavioral.
No. This is not how you will break down the question. Otherwise, you will get breakdown yourself in the examination. You see, executive position implies a complex morality. That means we are looking at leaders or managers. I understand that both are different ideas, but the idea is that we are looking at the higher level functionaries. Okay, complex morality. It's a complex morality and it requires high capacity of responsibility. Why? You see, herein you will have to incorporate Bernard's view on leadership as well as authority and communication, because these things are linked. How a leader can exercise authority through effective communication. Therefore, it is a matter of complex morality and responsibility. Why? Because the workers will not be working in line with the, or will not be giving contribution in line of the organizational goals, and hence it is the responsibility of this executive, functions of the executive, and therefore this executive, to bring about that contribution satisfaction equilibrium. How? Through these dynamics. Now some of you will end up writing the chief aspects of Bernard's theory or whatever is given in functions of executive head as certain pointers. That is not my answer. My answer is these analysis. Yes, those functions of the executive pointers, certain aspects of Bernard's theory, like you may start that organization is a social system as per Bernard. It's a system of consciously coordinated activities. But here, you will have to mention those points. समझे बात? कृपा कहाँ रुक रही है? So start thinking like this. Break it down. Next. This was a simple one which was asked in 2018. Bernard's model of contribution satisfaction equilibrium is still considered a logical model of organizational motivation. Do you agree? Give reasons. Obviously, you will have to agree to a large extent. Now, please understand this contribution satisfaction equilibrium. Bernard is talking in when? Bernard is talking late 40s, early 50s. Then you will, here in a very unsaid manner, you will have to bring in contemporary theories of motivation. And then juxtapose that yes, the contemporary theories also contain an element of contribution satisfaction equilibrium. You can use, if not anybody else, Simon. Okay? Just to show that it is not just Bernard who was talking about it, but there were others as well. Then for 2-3 years, Bernard is left for rest. Okay? And then comes 2022. Understand? Bernard posits the zone of indifference as the human condition that animates authority relationships and cooperation in modern organization. Examine. Listen to the question again. Bernard posits zone of indifference. That means Bernard is positioning zone of indifference as a human condition. Okay, unquestionable acceptance of order or compliance of orders will be done. That animates authority relationships and cooperations in modern organization. So you will have to see zone of indifference in modern organization. That is the question. Okay. Next comes 2023. Efficiency is the specialized sense, is an organization's capacity to offer effective inducements in sufficient quantity to maintain the equilibrium of the system. You see, the 2018 question coming back again. It is the same question, right? contribution, satisfaction, equilibrium, repeating itself in a different avatar. So it's like Vivek, today he is dressed in a very sober manner, right? Tomorrow there will be weekend and he will go to a pub dressed in all flashy clothes. It's the same guy. You understand? But a different perspective. So please, while you address the concept, contribution, satisfaction, equilibrium, address it from the perspective that is being asked, and that will make your answer better. Right? Let me go through, because since we have covered till Bernard, before I take up Simon, because Simon is somebody we take up in administrative behavior as well, and things like that. Let me exhaust those questions, right? So that if you do not know a meaning, you can ask, or you can at least reflect upon when you go back. 2016. Taylorism is considered very controversial despite its popularity. Stephen P. Waring comment. Okay. Next question was from the Human Relations School, 2017. And I'm going by the chronological order of the year. Okay, not by the topic. What is distinctive about classical and human relations school? And what is complementary? Okay, that is being asked. So similarities and differences. You see, MP Foley's question again 2017. Conflict is the appearance of differences, the differences of opinion and interest. MP Foley. Now, a lot of you end up committing this mistake. Whenever a statement of Foley is given, we will write everything that we know from Foley, right from where she was born to where she died. That's not the point. That's not the point that we should be looking at. The question is giving a specific idea, Foley's view on conflict, and decipher the statement. Conflict is the appearances of differences, the differences of opinion and interests. It's not a war. It's a difference of opinion and interest. So, integration. So, somehow you should derive an answer which can take you back to the question. Okay? I guess I talked about Waldo's statement uh, that mentions the roots of administrative theory in the political theory. है ना? बात हो गई थी ना उस बारे में? ठीक है. Then again, Foley. MP Foley traced the foundational value of business and enterprise by her way to understand the organization or to understand the organism of government machinery. Simple, how Foley actually framed and what she framed. Then 2020. Principle of analysis and principles of action were not differentiated in Taylor's scientific management. What Taylor was using as the principles of analysis? Observation. Okay. What were his principles of action? Again, observation. Time and motion studies, all those things. So, they will come here. Administrative man bridges the psychological and rational man. When we'll study Simon bounded rationality, administrative man, then it will come up. Then again, Mayo. Productivity is not the result of working conditions, but the result of emotional response of workers. Okay? Are Elton Mayo's findings relevant in contemporary organizations? You see, take example of Swachh Bharat, Safai Karamcharis. Okay? So the working conditions of Safai Karamcharis are poor. Okay? But if we have provided an element of dignity to their work, that ये कूड़े वाले नहीं है, ये तो सफाई वाले हैं, कूड़े वाले तो हम हैं, right? So these are the ambassadors of clean India. We are the ones who are making it dirty. So immediately you have added a socio-psychological element to their identity. Change हो गया मामला. And hence it is relevant to the contemporary organization. Another example. Look how Swiggy, Zomato, or all these Qcom, Blinkit, Zepto are labeling their delivery boys. Like, we might call them in common parlance delivery boys, delivery executive, customer experience agent. है ना? They are changing the perspective. So they are hitting at the socio-psychological aspect. Right? So that is something that is still relevant. Next, Fayol and Taylor had different management perspectives while having the similar goal of organizational efficiency. Remember, while doing Fayol, I talked about how Fayol is focusing on structure, whereas Taylor was focusing on activities. Then there are questions like integration of different streams of administrative thought to propound a universal administrative theory is hindered by the impact of culture. This is something that we have dealt. Then there would be simple anecdotal questions like classical organization theory formed the bedrock of the modern organization theory. Okay, so if there was no classicals, there would be no modern. Next, human relations. Again, human relationists postulate that what is important to a worker and what influences his or her productivity level may not be the organizational chart. You understand? Hierarchy, structure, position. Organizational chart would mean that. What is an organizational chart? It's like a chart, wherein you have, okay, this is the CEO, this is the director 1, director 2, this is this vertical, this is this organizational chart. That means, look how indirectly it is putting. It's not the organizational chart, but his or her associations with other workers. Is it relevant today? So here, when it says human relationist, you will have to use Mayo, Bernard, Simon, all of them. Especially people like Mayo and Bernard, who are emphasizing on that relationship aspect. Okay. Then again, Foley. So this is something you see, Taylor, Foley and Bernard, they are getting repeated so much. Foley firmly advocated for cultivating interdependence and collaboration amongst individuals as the key to resolving conflict and establishing more harmonious and all-encompassing social structures. Discuss. क्या topic है? What is the topic at the heart of it?
Communication and
Integration.
Integration.
Earlier also we talked about integration. Okay. Then another question that we did, which I was saying is an abstract question which was asked in 2021. The integration of different streams of administrative thought to propound a universal administrative theory is hindered by impact of culture. Now look at how they asked the same question. Same question in 2023. ऐसा भी नहीं है कि that the gap is 15 years. Just after 2 years. Organization theory is not a single theory with a loosely knit of many approaches to organizational analysis, and it provides different answers to different situations. Earlier we were saying many approaches, universality was there, the quest was there, but we will balance our answer and say that no universality is applicable, it is situational, contextual, or things like that. And similarly in this question we have already accepting that it is contextual, and we have to talk about the theory building. It is just this pen is like this, we have to hold it like this. That's it. Same question. So your content part for this will remain the same. Okay? That is why I see analysis of PYQs are very important. ठीक है जी. नेक्स्ट करते हैं साइन. Simon. Okay, but before that, let me take up the questions of the Simon so that you orient yourself. See, Herbert Simon's book, Administrative Behavior, presents a synthesis of the classical and behavioral approaches. Now you will have to find the commonalities. See, before starting this unit, I told you that we will have to look at certain aspects. What was there, what is now. So this comparative analysis within the theories is very critical. And based on that, you can have your mastery over the content which is needed. Rest is the context which will be there in the examination. Okay. Next, have a look. Just give me a moment. (2021). So earlier it was asked in 2018, then after 3 years, 2021. Two-dimensional taxonomy was used by Herbert Simon to describe the degree to which decisions are programmed or non-programmed. So programmed and non-programmed decision making. So for a long time, Simon has not been asked. If I look at past 8 years, 7 years, okay, from 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 20 until 23, 8 years. Simon has been asked just the twice from this unit. Okay, but nonetheless, we should have a look at the Simon. Okay, I am not getting into every individual concepts, as in not the entire decision making theory, but certain pointers are needed. First of all is the Simon's criticism of the classical theory. That is what sets the tone for his analysis on decision making. So with regards to who forms this? किसने? Okay. Gulick and Ervik, right? Simon says that these are nothing but proverbs. These are nothing but proverbs and myths. He says that these principles are flawed. For every classical principle, there is another principle given by classicals which are contradictory. Okay? He says that the classical view that increases specialization, provide a hierarchy with unity command. Okay, you bring about the limitations in terms of how many members where, grouping them. Okay, he says what classicals are saying as principles, they are not principles, they are merely assumptions. Because what they are saying as principles, when they applied, they are completely different. Okay, the principle, for example, of unity of command is in contradiction with the principle of specialization. So there can be a single critique question on the critique of Simon, because there it is pointing out so many inconsistencies. Okay. So have a look at the critique of Simon. But there is a point that Simon himself wanted to evolve a pure science of administration. Can anybody tell me the core of this statement? He wanted to evolve a pure science of administration. Simon.
Universal. That is, you want to form a universal.
Anything that is universal is scientific. Huh? Faith, it is universal. It's subjective. It's not scientific. Kaha? Let me give the statement again. बताइए. सोचिए. Flip through the pages. क्या हो सकता है? What part of Simon are we alluding to?
Behavioral part कि what the work.
अंधेरे में तीर मत चलाओ. Give me a logical basis. अंधेरे में तीर मत चलाओ. Don't do the guesswork. Prelims नहीं है. See here. What is the basis of Simon's analysis? Pure science means something which is objective. What is a science? Something which is objective, empirical, verifiable, quantifiable. And these are the traits of science. So Simon talks about fact value dichotomy, where he says that the administration is based on decision making, and those decisions should be based on facts, not values. And that is the pure science he was talking about. That a body of knowledge which is based on facts in the context of administrative phenomena would entail a pure science of administration. Okay? Then he gives the concept of economic man, administrative man. Okay? So the idea of economic man was a classical idea. So the concept of economic man was a classical idea. The economic man is completely rational. So with regards to decision making where an economic man is involved, we can say that such a decision will be completely rational, both means as well as the ends. Okay? Whereas when we talk about the administrative man, he looks at satisficing or good enough, not the best way. है कि नहीं? अरे समझ में आया कि नहीं आया? Okay, so the differences between the economic man and the administrative man and the concept of satisficing. Fact value dichotomy is something that I have talked about. Okay, and then eventually we see the administrative man being represented by not the absolutist notion of rationality as given by the classicals, but by the bounded rationality element as given by Simon. So, with regards to economic man and administrative man, we can have a difference of rationality and bounded rationality. Okay? So, rationality would be a normative idea, whereas bounded rationality will be a descriptive idea. Okay? Rationality would mean perfect rationality, whereas bounded rationality would mean partial rationality. In the absolute rationality situation, you will exhaust all possible alternatives. Even those are not available. Whereas in bounded rationality, you consider only available alternatives. In case of absolute rationality or rationality, perfect knowledge of outcomes and problems is there. Whereas in bounded rationality, you have imperfect knowledge. Absolute rationality would include optimal decisions, whereas the bounded rationality will include satisficing decisions. Okay? Then you have the programmed and non programmed decisions. Programmed decisions are what? Which are repetitive, routine. A definite procedure is there and you will come at a decision. Whereas non-programmed are new and unstructured. New and unstructured. You see, but there is an element of routinization in both. In programmed decisions, okay, the specified responses are there and they are based on routinized procedures. Whereas in non-programmed decisions, you routinize the process of search. The difference is that in programmed, the rules and regulations exist in a far more concrete manner. Whereas in non-programmed decisions, yes, there are certain rules and regulations, but they are not enough to actually make you arrive at a decision. More subjective elements are needed. In this case, S.R. Maheshwari, there is a book by S.R. Maheshwari on administrative theories as well. Okay? When you have time somewhere, sometime after the exams, and just for your intellectual appetite, you would like to read, you can read her book. Very good. So, his book, I beg your pardon. S.R. Maheshwari actually is looking at certain aspects of the program decisions. Okay? According to S.R. Maheshwari, they are not really decisions as we are looking at them. They are merely mechanical sorting of cases and not decisions. Because see, it's like a sorting line. For example, there are different currency notes. Dollar, rupee, pound, yen. And you have to simply pick up those notes and there's a process that you have to put them in a tray. Your objective is to separate the currency and there is a process. So there is no decision. You are looking at it, okay, this is Japanese currency, I'll put it in tray C. This is American currency, I'll put it in tray B. So this is just the mechanical sorting. These are not the decisions. Okay. However, there are other scholars who say that the scope of discretion, sophistication, regularity of procedures can differ from case to case. So even in the programmed scenario, somebody might have to apply certain discretion. So it differs. Right? I wanted to give you the perspective of S.R. Maheshwari just for the fact that you said that you need Indian thinkers. Okay? Similarly, Simon talks about influence. Influence, he says, there is an internal influence and an external influence. Influence, that means influence on decision makers. So internal would mean related to organization. External would mean authority or the power to come to decisions that provide guidance to action of others. So in this case, if you see, with regards to authority, Simon is borrowing from Bernard and enhancing it. So what was the zone of indifference there? With a bit modification, it is becoming the zone of acceptance. Okay? And influence plays a very important role. Similarly, have a view on of Simon on planning, review, hierarchy, communication. Okay. Next, let's come to criticism of Simon. One is, I hope you all of you know, the critique based on the fact and value aspect. Later, Simon himself admitted to it. Okay. You see, Simon puts decision making at the core of the organization. But his critics say that it is an important activity, but it does not explain the totality of the organization. Okay? And while arriving at the process or looking at the decision making, whether he is looking at various factors, programmable, non-programmed decisions, use of influence, okay, all those things, Simon is not taking into account certain environmental factors like social, political, economic, or cultural factors. Also, while looking at the Simon's obsession with facts with regards to decision making, please understand that whenever you are looking at facts, they are always more useful where environment is less subjective and less diversified. The moment this environment is becoming more subjective, more diversified, the fact alone should dictate the good decisions to bring about organizational goals. The importance of facts gets eroded. Therefore, this obsession of facts is good, is correct to a large extent with regards to businesses. But when it comes to administration, This is not a very right thing to do. Why? Because he is ignoring the political, social, cultural, economic factors. Okay? It is this exclusion of values. They are the essential component of any administration. Also, his critics are saying his theory is very generic, very general. It only provides the framework but lacks the details. Okay? His idea of rationality is also getting questioned. He says that in this pursuit for rationality, Simon has become too mechanistic in nature. He is ignoring the psychological elements like intuition, tradition, faith. Okay? And just is using a simplistic notion of fact value dichotomy. Similarly, Selznick and Norton Long says that this artificial dichotomy between the fact value for decision making is nothing but bringing back the idea of, remember, this idea was discredited, bringing back the discredited idea of political administration dichotomy. Also, when we say Simon was actually looking to develop the pure science, so he is actually embarking on a quest for universality. But we have seen how administrations perform in various systems and they can be poles apart. So while Simon's fixation is that if you will do this, it will work in all societies, but things might not go that way, especially between the developing and the developed world. So while being, you know, looking at decision making and other things, he resurrects the science of administration aspects. And with this, he's also resurrecting some of the problems that were associated with the science of administration. But his criticism of the classicals is something which is very logical. Okay? Next is the participative management. You see, with regards to participative management, first let us see the questions. And you will see that very few questions and very specific questions are being asked from this particular area. 2016, McGregor's X and Y theory. Okay? And it is asking just the difference between the two. Okay? Then 2017, while earlier it was asking for theory X and Y, here now it is asking about Argyris and Leclerc, but with a context. Context, some of the core idea of the participative management school. The question says, the participative management school of Argyris and Leclerc advocates democracy within the administrative system. Will this approach be equally useful to developing countries with evolving democracies? Now, this is something that you will have to deal with. Suddenly, the level or the notch is of question, the level of difficulty has gone up by several notches, and this was a 20 marker. 3A was the question, 2017. Now, in this case, while you will look at Leclerc and Arguris, tell me the broader idea of Leclerc. कुछ नहीं पढ़ा, याद नहीं है. Arguris? When you say that they are participative scholars, participative thinkers, we are looking at democracy within the organization system. So the participative school, the basic characteristics, the basic features of the participative school can actually lead you to justify that they both are striving for administrative systems in a democratic manner. Okay, will this approach be equally useful to developing countries with evolving democracies? Now that is a background in which you have to analyze this. So here you can use even the CPA, that the ethnocentric view will not work. That is why this question is complex. The ethnocentric view will not work. We will have to view a contextual. So the higher level of differentiation, the greater level of, which is there, participation. So all of it will depend. There will be certain activities which cannot be democratized in countries which are in the initial levels of development. So you will have to build that sort of a reasoning. Okay, and that is why it is important. It is not something that you just write the notes of Leclerc or Arguris. Okay, so keep this aspect in mind. Okay, then for many years, participative system again kept hidden. Okay, just like the human relations school. Then it comes back in 2022. Look at the way questions have changed. Every human organization shall have a start from system 1 and ultimately end up with system 4. Comment on Leclerc's statement. So also when in the previous question you were looking at Leclerc, you will have to talk about that those countries or those democracies will be in system 1. So they cannot reach system 4 suddenly. There has to be a process. Okay. So this is something that every human organization shall start from system 1 and ultimately end up system 4. Comment on Leclerc's statement. Here you can use the example of the previous year's question of developing democracies. So you see the study of PYQs help you even get the examples. Okay. Next, we haven't had a question from the participatory school for last 8 years apart from these examples. ठीक है जी. Now, let me tell you certain general points about the participatory school. I am not going to deal with Leclerc system 1, 2, 3, 4. That has already been dealt by all of you. Okay. The question is, what can participative school slash theories achieve? They increase the feeling of cohesiveness, bring about better understanding between employees and management, ensures better utilization of human resources. It gives due recognition to the personality of the participants. It allows the room for workers to be creative. It safeguards the interest of the employees. Okay. A closely related idea is again the behavioral school. So, the cardinal elements of the behavioral school is that it is descriptive and analytical and not prescriptive. So, obviously, it will be stressing on the practical aspects, that is, the informal relations, communication patterns, decision making authority, motivation, power, leadership. Okay. Now, please understand, whenever we are looking at a behavioral school, can we say it lacks scientificism?
Not
No.
detached.
No. The idea, like I told you, for the behavioral is it's descriptive and analytical. So, the moment it is analytical, that means it is empirical. So, there are certain points which are completely non negotiable about the behavioral school. Those points are that they only accept the empirically tested and verified knowledge. Also, they give immense focus on collection, interpretation of data, its measurement and manipulation. They believe in fact value dichotomy. Also, the ethical evaluation is done from the empirical perspective. So, even if you are doing a ethical validation, you will be looking at a empirical perspective, like Pareto's optimality. Okay, it is systematic. That means it links theory to practice of administration. That is focused on practical problem solving. It is focused on the relationship between individual and organization, the administrative part. Since it's empirical, legal, objective, so it is focusing on the legitimacy. So you have scholars like Maslow, Herzberg, McGregor, Blake Mouton, to a certain extent, Argyris. Argyris, why? Because he talks about a fusion process. Okay? Likert for management systems. So, when we look at them, we will have to look at participative, neo-human relations, behavioral, socio-psychological approach. participative, neo-human relations, behavioral, socio-psychological approach. Okay? All right. Next task. There is a linking pin model by Likert. Right or wrong? Linking pin model hai. And then there is a scalar chain, Fayol, right? And the functional foremanship, Taylor. Okay? Draw me a comparison of all the three. Obviously, while talking about linking pin, though we are focusing on structure, but we are focusing away from the traditional hierarchies, right? So, difference क्या निकल कर आता है वो समझना है. I need to understand what is the difference, and do you understand that difference? Okay. Next, criticism of Likert. Criticism for Likert. You see, critics say that whatever the system 4 is, it was based on a very small group. While Likert actually emphasizes on role specification, he is also talking about cross-functional teams, matrix departmentalization. And these are the contradictions which are there. Departmentalization where? Where do you study? Organizational units. So there you can connect this. Both the contribution of Likert and the criticism, howsoever the question comes. The measurement that Likert comes up is very crude. It's not very specific. Also, the empiricism that and the measurement idea that Likert talks about lacks the unanimity of scholars. They say it's complex, vague. Also, Likert's models like linking pin actually slows down the process of decision making. Okay? Similarly, let us look at the criticism of Argyris. You see, at the heart of Argyris is an idea or the quest that the organization or the manager should create an environment so that the worker realize his or her best potential. Okay. That as if everybody is a benign fellow working for that. Organization have many social aspects. Okay. The idea of self-actualization has been given by this guy, Argyris, is being questioned that it's a utopic idea. And the universality of that self goal has been questioned. Like we see people, who are criticizing Herzberg or Maslow, they say that at different times, different needs can actually predominate. So this idea is a utopian idea. Simon, to an extent, my God, Simon was somebody who, did not use to mince words. Simon says that this self-actualization is comparable to anarchy. He says organization is a part of one's life. It cannot be the be-all and end-all of an individual's life. Similarly, other scholars are saying that job is a part of life, not heart of life. So, the relationship of an individual with his satisfaction in the context of job is being overemphasized. Okay? Also, the disregard for authority that Argyris shows has been criticized. He says, especially the Drucker says, Peter Drucker, that the principle of participation is being presented as a replacement to the mechanistic and the authoritarian system in the traditional organization. And he labels Argyris as a romantic, who's romanticizing with romantic. Please, for those who do not understand romanticism, I am not talking about a romance between a male or a female. Romanticism is particularly a school of thought which extrapolates any idea under consideration to its absolutist benign and good intentions, which might not be really possible, the idealistic ideas. Okay, so the point here is this, that is why he is being labeled as romantic. Okay, so these are some of the criticisms. Next is McGregor. I am not getting into theory X, theory Y, right? I'm not getting into all of it. You see, the traditional concepts of the administration, which were rejected by McGregor, like authority, control, they cannot be done so. They still have a role to play in understanding the motives of the humans. Also, the theory Y idea, while it is good as a theory, as a framework to understand a reality, but it is not something which is practically implemented. Okay? So this is at the core of the McGregor. In general, we can say that the behavioral school, participative school, or the neo-human relations school actually is nothing but an improvement over human relations school. It is not a drastic shift. However, this school, while is looking at behaviors, is charged with ignoring of values. from the study of administration. So in its quest for a value-free knowledge, it has ended up producing an ethnically neutral administration, which is socially irrelevant. Which is socially irrelevant. Also, the way the behavioral school has shaped up its postulates, it is good enough for a small reality, for a small organization, but cannot be applied as a universal yardstick for national administrations. It is descriptive in nature and it is limited to what? It is limited to what? And fails to prescribe what ought to be. And fails to prescribe what ought to be. Also, the organizational phenomena is diverse. And the behavioral school only gives us certain information about a part of that diverse framework, diverse reality. It lacks a comprehensive conceptual framework. It overemphasizes on the psychological variables. It overemphasizes on the psychological variables and underemphasizes on the other relevant aspects. Okay? So, if you will look at the breakup that we have for the sessions, we have completed till session 8 or so. Okay, systems theory, ecological theory, contingency theory, critical theory, and then moving on to the parts of communication, motivation theories, content, traditional modern theories, leadership theories, etc. That is the behavior part is to be taken up. Right. So we'll be taking them up in the similar manner, just like we have taken up these parts. Okay, emphasizing on criticism, interlinkages, etc. I will not be getting into the factual theoretical aspects, just like we did not discuss the systems as such. Okay, so we'll be taking up this approach. All right. Understood? Any sort of queries with regards to it? Friends here and friends watching us online. Any query? Vivek? ठीक है? क्या?
Clarity. If it comes, I will ask.
Right. So my request is till the next class, whatever exercises I have given you, do that and have a look at all these thinkers. Okay, so that by the time you are sitting in the next class or attending the next class, you have the clarity. It seems a lot, but it is not a lot. Okay, once you will start doing it, you can easily do it. So with this, I'll end today's session, right? And we'll resume in the next session from systems approach, and we'll go forward, completing, the systems theory, critical theory, something that we have dealt. Okay, and other aspects, and then eventually into units of accountability, control, administrative law, etc. All right. Thank you.